What's the party, people? Survivor Teek back again here for episode 4. After a really heavy episode 3 focused on advantages, it was really nice to get a different change of pace this episode and to really get a sense of what the tribe dynamics are. We finally got to see what's happening in Luvu. So let's just get right into it. We come back from the blowout, from Brad being voted out and Jeannie being blindsided. And for my last episode, I chatted about how this may have been a good decision with Shan. I was talking to one of my good buddies, and he was saying, you know what, this was a terrible decision for Shan, because now Jeannie's going to be really upset with Shan, will never want to work with her again, and she put herself in a situation where she didn't have this steal a vote advantage that Brad had, and to have the ability to utilize that moving forwards. And it was really interesting to see that play out immediately afterwards when Jeannie was upset. And Shan had a really strange move to try to calm Jeannie down. Shan was like, you don't even know shit about Brad. You don't know everything about him. Brad had a steal a vote and you didn't know about it. And so it was unclear whether Brad or Jeannie chatted about it. I'm expecting Brad to talk to Jeannie about it. I think Jeannie really was Brad's number one. But Shan, this seemed like a pretty emotional outburst from her, and JD caught on right away. And JD said, wait a second. You find out stuff about him and you don't tell me and you lose your mind when I have a hidden advantage. I kind of feel for Shan a little bit because JD was just being silly and like showing this piece of paper in his hands when he revealed that he had this additional vote. But it was a poor move by Shan strategically. And so you start off this episode thinking that, you know what, like Jeannie's upset, JD's upset. Maybe the two of them are going to band together, and we'll get to the vote later on. But JD and his we know JD was voted off, and JD in his exit interviews, he talked a lot about how he really was trying to work with Brad and Jeannie, but Brad and Jeannie were just so loyal to Shan. And interestingly enough, JD compared Shan to Boston Rob from Redemption Island and from previous seasons as well, Heroes vs. Villains, Marquesas. He's one of the most famous Survivor players ever, and Boston Rob was somebody who played a bit with like a mafia strategy, where he was the godfather, the Rob father, as they call him. And the parallel is pretty interesting with Shan. Shan describes herself as somebody who, she's the mafioso pastor. And so there's something to be said about Shan really dividing and conquering. And we're really seeing that through the course of the episode. But let's just jump to the reward challenge next. And I like the bifurcation of the reward and the immunity challenges. I think it's definitely interesting to see who sits out. And that's really where the strategy comes into play. And so Luvu had to figure out who are they going to put on the bench and who are they going to have actually compete for the immunity challenge. Not knowing exactly if the immunity challenge is going to be more swimming, more physical, more strategic, more skill-based, exactly how that challenge is going to go down. So they chose to side out Erica and Naseer, which makes sense. Naseer's pretty strong. Erica is good at puzzles. In their mind, they're probably thinking that Danny and Deshawn are the most well-rounded people, and of the 6, 2 will have to compete in both, and then you'll have, of the remainder 4, 2 in the other challenges. So they probably thought that, you know what, our order of strength in her team is probably Danny, Deshawn, Naseer, Erica, Sydney, Heather, or something along those lines. And there's not much to say about that reward challenge. Heather wasn't able to do it, and they should have maybe noticed that and maybe left Heather in for the additional immunity challenge, especially because they were planning to throw it, or at least a couple of them were. I'm not sure exactly how the timeline really did play out. Sometimes they edit and move things around to help create the narrative, but the reward also wasn't that exceptional. Like, it's some man who's able to just help you around camp. Like, cool, but you're probably getting to the merge phase soon. You'll probably get that knowledge and skill set later on anyways. And especially when you're the blue tribe, you have Naseer, who's basically Nathan anyways, and he's able to climb trees and get breadfruit. So I just don't think Blue really cared about that challenge. That's probably why they put Heather there, and Heather had her moment where she wasn't able to throw the ball and run and catch it. And that's unfortunate. One interesting thing I caught on that challenge, though, was it ended up being the Ua tribe, the green tribe, ended up winning, and yellow got second place. But I thought they said that when they were throwing the ball up in the air, it was only the one player in every tribe had to get their own ball in. So you saw that in green. Like, Ricard went, and then JD went, and then Shan went. But when it was yellow, Tiffany threw all 4 of them, which I think was against the rule. But I think Jeff Probst was too busy running back and forth between the different stages to notice. So it was interesting that they kept Tiffany in that position, and she's showing to be a little bit of a challenge threat. And we get into yellow. This was the only time we see a Yasta tribe this entire episode. And as far as we understand, the dynamics in that tribe is still with Xander at the bottom, and the three women are in charge in terms of the alliance structure. And we hear a little bit from Tiffany saying, look, like, I'm doing okay. Like, I'm getting some strength back. I'm getting some momentum. And you had some confessionals from Evie talking about how, they were kind of called out at the start, but they're kind of pushing themselves back in and had their little turtle scene, and that they're counted, but they're not out. And so we didn't really get a lot strategically from Yellow, but it probably seems like Evie and Tiffany are still kind of in control. We didn't hear from Liana again. We heard from her in the previous episode about wanting to make a big move. We saw in the preview that, they're going to go through Xander's bag. So is Xander still the big move? That's the obvious move, but we'll see how the Yasta tribe dynamics play out. Then we got to see the tribe dynamics at Luvu. This is the blue tribe, and finally we understand a little bit more about what's happening in Luvu outside of actually Naseer. And so you see this a lot in tribes that don't go to tribal council, where their alliances aren't being tested. If they went early, it's very likely that Naseer or Heather would have gone, because Naseer wasn't really part of the social harmony. Heather's maybe challenge liability. Those are two very common reasons to vote people out right away. But because they haven't really been tested, alliances haven't been forged. The presumptive alliance of four, which is Sydney, Erica, Danny, and Deshawn, they don't even really know if they can trust each other. They all probably have side stuff going on with Naseer and Heather, to be quite frank. And so you started to see a little bit of Deshawn being in the middle. Deshawn seemed to be Erica's number one, as well as pretty close to Sydney. Erica, for reasons that weren't quite clear, it's great to hear from her. I like the Toronto girl, and she's talking about how she's a lion. I'm a lion myself, so we go hard. But she wanted to get rid of Sydney because she was emotional or erratic, and they showed one scene where she wasn't able to get the flint, and Naseer came in to do the flint instead. And she went to Deshawn, and Deshawn was a rat. The blue tribe was just full of rats, apparently. And so Deshawn goes straight to Sydney and says, hey, Sydney, your name's being called. And it's really funny what Sydney says. Sydney's like, wait, Heather? No. Naseer? No. Danny? No. Erica is literally the last person on her list. So part of me thinks that this might backfire on Deshawn. Deshawn's trying to be a little bit too sneaky. Like, I always question why people tend to scramble so much before tribal even happens. Like, before tribal happens, it's good to be in a harmonious position. And all it takes is for Sydney to go to Erica to say, look, Deshawn's kind of being a bit of a mole for each of us. How about we just grab Naseer and Heather, who are presumably just free agents on that tribe, and then we get rid of Deshawn. So I never really felt good with Deshawn, and Deshawn had this crazy idea to throw the challenge, which we chatted about last episode, but throwing a challenge again, it's complete tribal suicide, especially with the shot in the dark, especially with different advantages in play, beware advantages. The blue tribe probably just doesn't know the extent of what exists, like the green tribe, where there's like multiple advantages that they have to navigate every episode. So they probably don't have the realization of how pivotal that is. And I don't know if Deshawn feels like he's close with Heather and Naseer, but it's like, in a tribe of 6, it only takes 2 or 3 people to really flip the script entirely. So very weak move by Deshawn, in my opinion. And we end up essentially seeing the immunity challenge where Deshawn and Danny try to throw it. And it's almost hilarious to see how poor the other 2 tribes are doing. You have Evie swimming in the wrong direction. You have JD at the last part of the challenge just missing the rings. And so Naseer basically single-handedly beasts this challenge. You see him pushing the wood through, and then when Deshawn is flubbing the ring through, Naseer comes in and steps up. And good on for Naseer. Like, that's a powerful move. Naseer is showing his loyalty to the blue tribe. He's showing loyalty to every single person. He clearly wasn't part of this plan. Neither was Erica, because those 2 were working towards it. And so it was silly in itself for Deshawn and Danny to think that just the 2 of them can throw a challenge with 4 people in it, with Heather on the bench presumably not knowing it. It's just a very odd play. Like, typically when you see a challenge being thrown, it's literally everybody except for one person who's in on it. Or, maybe like that's really the only reasonable way to deal with a challenge throw. So it was a mess up of a challenge throw. I think Deshaun probably got out okay with it. You didn't really see Deshaun doing it too obviously, maybe at the end of the ring toss, but you saw JD struggling, you saw Tiffany struggling as well. So people are struggling with the ring toss component. But yeah, Blue got away with it. And then Green, it's the same old for them. They've turned to the new Yellow tribe. They're the new weak tribe. They probably shouldn't have voted off Brad, who I think presumably could have helped them a lot in that challenge. But they're just thinking too many steps ahead a little bit in that tribe. So they end up going to tribal, and you have Shan have this amazing confessional where JD was trying to do his basketball Allen Iverson style stuff again, and then Shan was like, "Hey, like don't yellow money. You should yellow tribal because that's where we're going." So the rest of the episode, we really get a sense of the internal tribe dynamics of Ua, the Green tribe. And this is probably the tribe that we know the most about and we have the most understanding about. And so there's a lot in play over here. And so the obvious move for JD should have been, I'm going to work with Jeannie. I have my additional vote. The three of us can vote out either Ricard or Shan. They're sitting ducks, absolutely. And in post-exit interviews, JD, this is why I don't even trust the post-exit interviews sometimes. JD's talking about how he knew that Shan and Ricard were a tight duo and that, he wanted to work with Brad and Jeannie. From the edit that I saw, Jeannie was at the bottom for a while and she wanted to work with JD. So it is quite perplexing. It really is that JD wasn't able to see that move. You see JD say, I'm lying to Jeannie. Jeannie's the one who's got to go. What type of threat is Jeannie? Like, I think in those shoes, when you're JD, you work with Jeannie. You are clearly on the two opposite sides when there's a power duo and you have to bond together, and he has that additional vote. And so it's quite interesting because Shan is the one who picks up entirely on that plan potentially transpiring, and she's like, I want to stop this plan. I thought this was a weird move to basically beg JD and say, look, I'm really scared that you're going to use that additional vote. Can you please just give it to me for safekeeping? And you got the confessional at the start of the episode where JD was basically saying, fool me once, shame on me, but fool me twice, that ain't gonna happen. Like, I'm JD. Like, you don't get me twice. He got got. So he gave his advantage over to Shan for safekeeping once again. Like, why would you do that? JD himself said, always keep your advantages. And here he is giving it away once again. So then you start to see Shan's wheels turn, and Shan's talking about, you know what, now that this is in my pocket, why don't I work with Ricard and Jeannie and get rid of JD? And in fact, that is what happened. And I think finally Shan made a smart move. I think, although it was maybe contested last episode, I saw reasons both ways. 100% it made sense to get rid of JD. I think this is next level advanced for Shan as well. I mean, this is a great move for multiple reasons. On one hand, she now has this additional vote, and people will think that Shan hasn't been part of any of these visits to the summit or anything like that. They know that JD may have it, but they won't even suspect the fact that Shan has it. So this might be a real good ace in the hole for Shan moving forwards. I think it helped solidify her with Jeannie. Really, at the end of the day, it was between JD or Jeannie as a third. I think either way, they both knew that they were a third. And it's not like Jeannie has any bonds with anybody else in any other tribe at all. Whereas at least JD had that initial conversation with, I believe it was Danny and Xander in that first episode. And JD is a little bit sneakier than Jeannie, or at least Jeannie is what you see is what you get. So it almost looks in retrospect, Shan's decision made a lot more sense to get rid of Brad and then JD. And she's basically in the complete power position between Ricard and Jeannie, two people who don't really like each other that much either. So if there are blows, Shan's going to stay behind. I'd love to learn more about what Ricard is thinking. I'd love to understand more about what Jeannie was thinking when she made that decision. But it was probably just JD wasn't giving her enough. I think JD just got completely socially outmaneuvered in that tribe. And I think JD was fun. JD was playing a dream, but buddy, like, to play a game of Survivor, you gotta stay on the ball. You need to keep your social connections strong, and especially in a dwindling tribe, it just really behooves you to keep playing and keep making smart moves and not giving away advantages. The tribe of 4, people don't realize how few the numbers are. There's not a lot of room for error, so those errors are entirely magnified in that situation. So we got a preview for the next episode, and I'm looking really forward to it. We see people looking for Xander's bag. That's the yellow scene. One of the interesting moments was with Danny talking about, hey, the men need to team up. And you start to look at the tribe dynamics. And so in yellow, you have 3 women, 1 male. in Ua tribe, you have 2 female and 1 male. And so you're starting to see a lot of men leave. And I think maybe probably from Danny's perspective, he saw Abraham leave early. Now he's seeing JD leave. And so you're seeing a lot of stronger men being targeted. Really the only like quote unquote typical like strong male archetypes left in the game are Xander and Danny, maybe Deshaun, and maybe Naseer, but I think Naseer falls in a different stereotype. And so Danny's probably thinking long term, like the woman may probably bond together, and he's probably right. Like especially with Evie and Tiffany having a little bit of that, woman's power kind of dynamic, and really wanting to make that work. And you also have Shan, who seems to be a little bit more comfortable working without the alpha males around her. So you have a bit of that situation, and so Danny, the only thing is, it's like the people on your own tribe are still the people who are loyal to you, like gender be damned. Like that doesn't matter. Like you have the opportunity for the first 10 days to build bonds with Sydney, Erica, and Heather. And these are important players to build bonds with. And that bond's going to be stronger than some type of gendered alliance in the future. And so Danny should feel more confident on that. And I don't think there's much he ought to be worried about. So I found that a little bit of an interesting comment, but it's something you often see in Survivor, a little bit of a gender divide. And then in green, you see Jeannie finding the Beware advantage. And so we didn't get a lot from the Beware advantages. This seems to be a little bit of a complete flub of an advantage. We're down to, what is it now, 13 people? Typically, you see some type of merge or shift happen in even numbers. And so probably in 12, you're either going to get some type of tribe redistribution to 6-6 or the merge directly. And I'm sure the players are thinking about that. And so if you're someone like Xander, who still has that Beware advantage and isn't able to vote, you're probably thinking, hey, like, I just want the merge to happen because Blue's obviously not finding this. Green, it was Broccoli Brad who had it, and he got voted out. So we'll see how this Beware advantage plays. We haven't even really seen the dice come into play. We haven't seen additional votes come into play. And so we haven't seen the advantages come together. So I'm thinking come tribal, a lot of those tools in the toolbox are going to coalesce. And you might see some more interesting action happen. But yeah, overall, week 4 is looking good. In terms of who I think is playing the best game from a strategic viewpoint, we'll get to the contender analysis in my next episode. But strategically, I think Shan is playing well. I think it's not great that she's in a tribe that's whittled down to 3. I think in blue, I think Deshaun's playing a bit too messy. I think Sydney is still doing okay. The fact that she was a target and that she got the intel back to her and she was able to make a move preemptively looks pretty strong. You have people wanting to protect Sydney, Deshaun and Danny being basically meat shields for Sydney moving forward. So I feel good strategically for her. And then yellow, we just haven't seen enough from them. But Evie, Tiffany, Liana, if they can kind of fly under the radar, and if blue and green start to throw shots at each other post-merge, I think that type trio could actually make it pretty deep. And maybe it'll be the turtles that kind of just crawl beyond the rest and are able to make it to the end. So there's a lot of good strategy in the mix. We'll see what happens moving forwards. And until next time, this is Survivor Teek checking out. Thanks so much, guys.